Happy Framesgiving, everyone. I want to walk through a few live demos of V2 frames that have been built already, and also go over a few answers to frequently asked questions about Frames V2. So let's start with looking at a few live frames. These are all on Warpcast now. You can go try them out. I created a demo thread here in the Frames V2 channel, so I'll keep this updated as well as new frames come in. But go check these out and try them out yourself. So we have Yoink, an on-chain capture the flag game. You can yoink the flag, get the flag NFT. Hopefully most of you have played this before. We have the code for Yoink up. There's a link to it in the Frames V2 channel as well, and on the new Frames link tree that Dan shared out. So if you want to go take a look at this is a good example of a slightly more complex app than the demo app. It also supports both Frames V1 using Frames.js and Frames V2, so you can go kind of compare and contrast the approaches. So go check that out. That is on my GitHub at horseback/yoinkdevcon, I think. Cool. Steve built this FC box app, sort of like a PO box for Farcaster. So this lets you send a file to anyone else on Farcaster. Right now this is public. We're waiting for auth to make this private file sharing, but you can look up a user, upload a file, and send it to them. And oh cool, I have a file here. Let's go look. It's a horse. That's funny. So wow.xyz has built a V2 frame. Every wow.xyz pair is V2 framified. So if you drop a wow URL into Warpcast, this should render as a frame now, and you can tap to swap and trade wow meme coins. Cool, I canceled that transaction. So this is a really nice tipping stats frame for your ham, hunt, degen stats. Tap here, still a little under development, but yeah, check this out. You have your connected wallet, account stats, your username, storage stats. I don't have too many tipping allowances, but I think this shows ham, hunt, degen, a bunch of different types of tips. And I think this one is a great example. These tipping stats frames have really kind of maxed out what's possible to cram into the frame interface. A lot of times they load a lot of data, so they can be pretty slow. But I think this is great. This is like a really nice new clean interface for these tipping stats frames. So this is showcasing a lot of what is possible with frames that need to dynamically load a lot of different data and show you a very dense and complex user interface. You get a ton more space in here. You have the ability to load data from a bunch of different disparate sources much faster and sort of in a much cleaner way than Frames V1. So I think it's a fantastic example of what's possible now. We'll come back to this one, Dylan's personal website. So Mo at Butterfly built this chatbot frame. This is pretty cool. It's kind of like if you've used Grok on Twitter, it's a chatbot which has context about Farcaster information. So you can ask it something like, what are people talking about in New York today? Oops. And this will go pull out, Farcaster cast context and give you a quick summary. Here we go. Transit, workplaces, DevCon watch party. All right, Vishal built this basketball minigame. This is pretty fun. It has sound effects. Okay, I'm really bad. I'm really bad on iPhone mirroring, but let's see if we can get one. Okay, I give up, but this is pretty fun. I think a good demo of building a minigame in a frame. You'll get a high score at the end. There's a Payflow V2 frame preview. Maybe you've used Payflow. It's kind of an on-chain social payments hub for Farcaster. This one's great. This is really cool. I think Payflow does a great job with with designing interfaces that work really well in this mini app context, right? You can see the tab bar at the bottom for different actions. And I know Payflow team has been cooking on this for a while, so they have a ton of functionality in here for sending payments, for stuff like claiming degen and Moxie, different quick actions, all kinds of things you can do in here. This one is still relying on the previous version of Farcaster Auth. So if you tap into this frame and don't see the UI yet, or if it asks you to log in, you might need to go use the Payflow composer action first. But once you do that, you'll have a connected session, and then you can interact with this. And Auth, improved Auth is coming soon. That's on the roadmap. So you'll be able to do that in V2 frames, hopefully in the next week or two as we build that out. Okay, and finally, Dylan converted his personal website and blog into a V2 frame already. He wrote a good thread on how he did that. So go check this out in the Frames V2 channel just by dropping the embed tags into the right places on his blog. But this is pretty cool. You just click through. You can launch his site and browse through to all his past writing and blog posts. Cool. So those are the demos. I'll keep this thread updated as people build more frames. If you have one yourself, send it to me and I'll include it and showcase it. But yeah, congrats to everyone who has built something so far. Okay, so on to FAQ. We've had a few different questions come up a few times, so I want to cover those in a little bit of detail here. So the biggest one so far is I've started working on a frame. I pulled down the demo repo, spun up my tunnel, loaded it in the DevTools, and nothing's showing up. I'm getting a blank screen in the DevTools when I load it. And there are two reasons this can happen. One is the tunneling tool that you're using may be putting an interstitial between the DevTools loading the frame and your local dev server. So this is pretty common if you're on the free tier of ngrok. They will put up an interstitial that looks like this. And if you access it in the browser, you'll see this one-time warning that says, hey, you're about to visit a site through a tunnel, click through, it sets a cookie, and then lets you access it in the future. And in the DevTools context, you can't see this interstitial and click through to access it. So you may just notice that the app seems to hang, like you get a white screen or your splash page doesn't disappear. So if you're using the ngrok free tier, this is likely why. So ways you can get around this are, easiest one is just using a paid ngrok account. Another option is to use a different tunneling tool. So a lot of people have recommended Tailscale Funnel, which is another free tunneling tool. I also found this repo, Awesome Tunneling. Check this out, which has like hundreds of different tunneling tools, open source, paid, free, a bunch of different options in here. So there are tons of different tools you can use. I happen to demo with ngrok in the example because it was the tool that I already use and know, but you may want to use another one of these. So others that have come up commonly are Tailscale Funnel, and Cloudflare has a tunneling option as well. Or just upgrade your ngrok to a paid plan, and you can get around this interstitial. So yeah, unfortunately, ngrok is like frequently used for phishing and malicious stuff and other stuff online. So they put these interstitials in if you're using the free tier. So one way you can tell, I would say the best way to tell is if you're running your dev server. All right, we'll spin up our dev server, spin up my tunnel. So you're probably hitting the interstitial if you see a request come in over here to ngrok, but you don't see the HTTP request coming through to your local server. So that's one clue that you're hitting this interstitial and something in between your tunnel and your server is interfering. Okay, so yeah, solution there, go use a different tunneling tool or a paid tunneling tool. Thing two that might be happening, which is pretty common as well, is you may just not be, maybe if you're not using the demo or you've modified the demo a little bit. Thing two is that maybe you are just not calling the ready function. So here's where we're calling this in the demo component. We have a use effect in the component, right? This will run when it renders. And one of the first things we do in this component is we call the ready action, SDK actions ready. And this indicates to Workcast, hey, the app is loaded, you should hide the splash screen. So every app needs to do this. You can't just load the page, or your splash screen will stay up forever. If you don't call this function and you see the splash screen continuing to stay up forever, this is potentially why. So this is the first thing any V2 frame needs to do, is call this function, which says I'm ready, show the app to the user. And this is maybe a little less clear than it should be in the documentation, but everybody has to do this. This is the first thing any frame app needs to do. So think of this as kind of like a hook that you might put on document load or something like that, right? This is kind of the signal to Workcast that your app is loaded. So I'm going to remove this. Let's just demo this real quick. Oops. Let's pop over to the dev tools here. Okay, so there we go. The splash went away because we called this function. Let's not call it and see what happens. And I expect now this page is just going to hang forever. There we go. Okay, so two things there. Make sure you're calling SDK actions ready when your app is ready to go. That's going to clear the splash screen and display the content to the user. And thing two, if you don't see, you can notice here this time we saw those requests come through, right? Because my tunnel is working. If you don't see requests coming through to your dev server, you probably have something happening between your dev server and the tunnel, which is likely maybe an interstitial depending on your tunneling tool. Maybe it bears going over a little bit how the model works here as well, in terms of how your frame app communicates back with Workcast. Let's take this out. Just show this one more time. So the communication model here is client-to-client communication, meaning we have two browser windows, right? This is a web view browser embedded within the mobile app. And we have one web view browser window, right? This embedded window communicating over this API called post message, which is used for like browser window to browser window communication. So this SDK is sending, it abstracts over this post message interface, meaning that the Workcast client app, right, the mobile app itself, is listening for messages from this window. But this SDK is not, say, communicating with an external API. It's not making HTTP requests or, say, like JSON RPC requests to an RPC endpoint. It's doing sort of window to window, like browser window to browser window communication over this post message API. The SDK right now is actually using this tool called Comlink, which is an abstraction over post message, like a little library built by Google. We may or may not continue to use that. We use that to kind of get up and running with building the SDK quickly, but maybe we'll use JSON RPC, maybe we'll use some other messaging format. But that's how it works right now, right? And so it's this browser window to window post message API. And so when your app is communicating back to Workcast, it is one client app. Think of it, your browser app communicating to another client app, right? Communicating to the Workcast mobile app. And the mobile app is listening for commands that your app sends. When it gets those commands, we maybe go and hit the Workcast backend or hit another API or do something there. But there's not, it's not like client to server communication necessarily, right? It's client to client communication where the embedded app is communicating with the client app, which is listening for these messages. And then, of course, we go on and we make network requests and things based on handling those messages. But that's how the model works right now. I think that's kind of helpful clarification for folks maybe just understand how the model works. And yeah, we've had a few people who've had questions like, can I build a frame that doesn't use JavaScript, right? And right now you need to use the SDK, or can I build a frame that doesn't use the SDK at all? Right now you need to use this SDK because all the frame to client communication is abstracted over this message passing, command passing interface. So unfortunately, right now you can't build a frame that doesn't use JavaScript, right? Frames are web apps. They use HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and you need to communicate over this messaging channel. In the future, maybe you can use a different, non-Webcast provided SDK library, right? There's going to be a standard way to implement this interface, right? And so other people could go build the same kind of SDK package, but you probably do have to use at least a little bit of JavaScript in your web app in order to communicate back to whatever client has embedded your app. Okay, question number 2. How can you add multiple embeds at different routes, right? So in frames v1, you may have a frame endpoint, like a frame embed endpoint that is using things like route parameters, right? Maybe I have like, my cool frame .app / token / 0xabc123, whatever. Or we have a username, right? Like user horseback study, something like this, right? And this is a pretty common pattern in frames v1, right? We have different routes that have different frame embeds. Those frame embeds read some information out of that route and then maybe dynamically change their image or change their behavior based on that route. And a lot of people have asked, how can I add multiple embeds at different routes, right? How can I get the same behavior from frames v1 in frames v2? I think, people have some questions about the top level app association interface, right? This farcaster.json file where you specify a home URL and the connection here between how you can set up embeds at different routes. And ultimately, this is actually the same model as frames v1. So you can have embeds at whatever routes you define. What matters is that we are looking, as the client app, we're looking to parse an embed with the correct meta tags out of a route. That can be any route, any URL on the web. You can put those embed tags wherever you want. The farcaster.json file, this app manifest, and the home URL within this file is really defining kind of like the default behavior for your frame v2. And the idea here is that frames v2 are going to be installable. You can choose to add a frame to your app. Once you've added a frame, this home URL is kind of the default URL or the fallback URL that we'll use for your frame. But when a frame is embedded, when it's in the feed, when it's in this embed context, you can use whatever routes, whatever URL you want for that embed. So think of your farcaster.json, this manifest, as just the default behavior, and then you can drop embeds wherever you want in your web app, as long as they're following this farcaster frame embed format. So more concretely, let's go look at this. So I added a little demo to the demo app that shows how you can do this. So in the original demo app, we had this single embed on the home page. And maybe this was a little bit confusing because our home URL defined in our farcaster JSON manifest, this default URL, was also the same as the URL where we have the embed. It was just kind of because it was a simple demo. So this URL, let's go use the frame embed tester here. This URL is just the root URL of the app, right? Frames v2.vercel.app. And that's this frame defined here. And this FC frame meta tag defined here. And even more concretely, let's go find just to just to build the intuition here, let's go find that tag in the actual page, right? So here's the home page, frames v2 vercel.app. This is returning an HTML page. This page has some meta tags in the head. And here's the meta tag that we're looking for to see if this page has a frame embed or not. FC frame with this stringified JSON. You can see this matches up to the JSON that we're defining here. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. The key point though is that any URL in our app, any page on the internet can drop this tag into its head, drop this encoded JSON into its contents in this tag, and we'll parse it as a frame. So you still have all the flexibility you had with frames v1, and you can put these embeds wherever you want. You can use different dynamic images from page to page. You can put these wherever you want. So ultimately, they're all talking to the same app, right? We're sort of moving to a model in frames v2 where it's all a single app, right? Don't think of these as each URL is a separate app. But you have a single app with multiple different frame embeds that are all talking to the same app. Okay, so here's what that looks like. I've added some new routes in the app here. Where are these? Yeah, okay, so under app, there's a new frames directory. And I've added 2 new routes in here that will showcase different embeds at different paths and how you can set these up. So we have one dynamic route, so /hello/name. And then also we have one just at the /hello route here. So you'll notice the structure of this. If you haven't used Next, what happens here is there's sort of a routing functionality built into Next where when we create folders within this app directory, it's auto magically under the hood wiring up this router to create these pages for us, right? So this is going to define a path in our app at /frames/hello. There it is. And this little bracket syntax is defining a page with a dynamic route parameter, which is at /hello/name. So I've wired up these 2 pages in Next, and you can see we have different titles in here just to sort of show you which page you're on. So let's look at the static one first. Here's how it looks. So app frames hello page.tsx. This probably looks really similar. Let's even open the 2 right side by side. Here's the home page. Here's the nested page. But you can see here in the nested page, we're going to configure the frame embed details just a little bit differently. So we're going to point to a different Open Graph image route. Most of the rest of this is the same, right? The button's still going to say launch frame, same action type, same name. We're actually going to launch it into a different path. Right, so this URL here defines which route in your app we should load in the context of that frame. So in this case, we're going to load this hello route instead of just the root route. And we're going to use the same splash image and splash background. Not going to change anything there. We are, though, going to have some slightly different metadata. So when we define this metadata object defines the Open Graph tags that go into our page. And so, yeah, we're going to change the title, change the description. These will show if this happens to fall back on web. So right now, web is just falling back to Open Graph tags. We don't have frame launching on web yet, so these will show. It's a good practice right now to put these in your frame embeds on web, so there's a nice fallback. And we have this Open Graph image route here. So these Open Graph image routes are a little bit of Next magic as well. These are defining, like this is a conventional route built into Next that says where to go find your Open Graph image. But yeah, here we're going to define just an image for this embed that reads hello world instead of frames v2 demo. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Last step here, let's load the page /frames/hello. Let's go look at the tags in the head here. Okay, and there it is, right? This is the embed tag that's going to frameify this URL on the web. We have this embedded JSON data in here, and if we look carefully at this, we can see it's pointing to the right image URL, see frames v2 versus frames hello Open Graph image, and it's pointing to the right URL that we want to load from this frame, frames v2 frames hello. Okay, let's go try this in the dev tools. Oh, it's /frames. Okay, so /frames/hello. There we go. So we're loading that image. And if we tap this, it launches us into this page where I've added this header at the top that shows which page we're on. Okay, cool. So that's great. You can embed this in a static page, right? We could use a totally different image in here if we want. Maybe this is some frame with some different kind of functionality. We want it to load into a different part of our app. We have a ton of flexibility here with Frames V2. A really common pattern though is you have these dynamic parameters, right? Maybe your frame is parameterized by like a username or a token contract address or something, and so you want this to be to be dynamically parameterized in some way. One that came up recently is, hey, we want to have an embed for every different channel key on Farcaster, right? So how can we create a different embed that dynamically loads for every channel key? And you can do that with just a route parameter in your web framework, right? So let's take this one a step further here, and we will add this name parameter. So this is a route parameter in our app. Whoops. Let's go here to /hello/horsefacts. And in the app, we're just going to grab that out of the route parameter and put it in the page. So you could use this for a username, use this for a contract address, whatever like dynamic parameterization you want to do. And here's what that looks like. So we have this other nested route using this bracket syntax for route parameters in Next. And maybe slightly more complex, but basically pretty close to the other two examples we've looked at already. Now we're going to load this route parameter, get the name out of the params, which are already provided, and interpolate that into our frame. So in this case, we're going to use an image URL that's within, right, we need to construct this route to our Open Graph image URL. And also construct the URL using our route parameter. But the rest of this is the same as the other encoded frame embed. Doing a little more dynamic stuff with the meta tags here, right? So each of these pages is going to have a different meta tag saying hello name. And we're going to pass through that title to the page, just so we have close that feedback loop to show that we're on a different page here, that we pass this data through to our app. Okay, and let's go look at the meta tag in this page. Here it is, and you can see we're constructing that URL dynamically, frames hello horsefacts open graph image, constructing this URL dynamically, frames v2 Vercel app, frames hello horsefacts. And yeah, you can also see here some of those standard open graph tags that are embedded here. Hello horsefacts, personalized hello frame for horsefacts, etc. Okay, so same deal here. Let's go load this in the playground. And you'll see here we're loading those dynamic images. Hello horsefacts. Hello DWR. Hello whatever. So you can just use standard HTTP server routing to put these embeds at whatever routes you want. If you're using a dynamic server framework, you can just generate these routes ad hoc when somebody dynamically requests that URL. So if you want to do something like a frame for every single channel, or a frame that's associated with a username or contract address or whatever, you can use this pattern to do that. So zooming out from all this, like the bigger picture here really is that frames v2 are just like a lot of the same concepts from standard conventional web applications. You can use route parameters, you can use query parameters, you can put an embed in whatever URL within your application you want. So the application which is loaded inside this frame context is just a web page you can serve from a web application, and the URLs where you can embed these frame embeds, which are pointers to open up your app, are just HTML pages that you can put on the web wherever. So drop your embeds into whatever pages and use whatever routing tools and parameterization tools you are comfortable with and know well from kind of the standard web application stack that you probably have already used. Okay, question 3, how do I set a fallback image for web? So yeah, you might have noticed right now on web, some frames are just falling back. Frames just fall back to Open Graph image, right? So web is not implemented yet. Hopefully, it's coming in the next 3 days or so. Next week, one of the things we're going to work on early next week is just getting this deployed and shipped on web. But right now, we're falling back to Open Graph images, and this is kind of the design of frames, right? Like we still want this to be the way frames fundamentally work, right? If you're in a client that doesn't support these, they fall back to an Open Graph tag. Frames are just URLs, and when you click through, ideally there's an app that's there as well, right? You can look at Yoink here. It's not as interactive, right? It's just showing you as the flag right now and showing the recent activity, but you still see something here, right? And like this is still a good principle for building frames. We think hopefully with Frames v2, since they're a little bit more of sort of full-scale interactive web apps, there will be more pages like this where if you happen to click through, you actually will land on a page that is showing you something useful. Versus when you click through on a lot of Frames v1 right now, you just get an empty page where there's nothing. So everyone should ideally follow this principle, right? Where you should probably be putting Open Graph tags in your app and in your frames, so that when clients are calling back, there's something that they can parse and something they can see, even if they don't understand the frame standard. So here's another example. Vishal's basketball game didn't have meta tags this morning, so it kind of just falls back to this simple link. And he's since fixed it. Sorry, not picking on you, Vishal. This is a cool game. But he actually went back and added a meta tag to this. And if you drop this in now, let's just do that now. I think yeah, there we go. So he dropped Open Graph tags in here, and now this shows the actual frame image as a fallback. These are slightly different aspect ratios. We're using a 3:2 aspect ratio for frames, and these embeds, I think, are a 1:9:1 to 1 ratio. But point is here, you should put an Open Graph tag in your app, and you'll get fallback behavior in web. So the way to do that is, at least in Next, in Next and in our 2 demo apps, right, Yoink is the Next app as well that's doing a similar thing. In Next, we're getting this for free because we're using these standard Open Graph image handlers, which is kind of built in magically to Next and says these correlate 1-to-1 with each of these pages. So if we have an Open Graph image within this sort of app router convention, this will serve an Open Graph image from that URL. So this one is associated with this page, this one is associated with this page, this one is associated with this page. If you're not using Next and you're not getting this behavior for free, the way to set a fallback image on web is just to make sure there's an Open Graph tag in your app. Let's go look at Vishal's again. So just make sure that you're setting this OG image tag, here it is, along with your FC frame tag. And actually in V1, we enforced this. I think we would not render your V1 frame if you didn't also provide a fallback OG image tag. We may decide to enforce that in Frames v2 as well, because I think this is just good practice that everyone should do. So we will probably next week start enforcing this. And if you want to get ahead of that, good to probably start putting this in your app today. So just make sure you're also serving an OG image tag with some pointer to an image in there, some link to an image, along with your FC frame tag. And that'll ensure that when you fall back, there's a nice image that we can display on web. Okay, final one here. How do connected wallets work? So this has come up a few times, and the connected wallet model, because of the way MWP works on mobile right now, and sort of the mobile wallet model, is a little bit different than what you might be used to from building browser-based dApps. Let's just look at the preview here. Or sorry, the demo app here. Yeah, okay, so the demo app here is showing which address I have connected. There's this disconnect and connect button. You can see that it's always connecting to the same wallet, right? Like I can disconnect, I can connect, and it's just always giving me back that same wallet that's currently connected. If I send transaction, this will pop me in a rainbow. But I can't like change my wallet in here. It is sort of fixed to whichever wallet I'm currently connected to, unless I disconnect all the way through Warpcast. So if you do go out and like go into the Warpcast settings interface and change your preferred wallet in here, you can you'll be prompted on the next time you connect to select wallet, or if you change from like Rainbow to Coinbase, you may be prompted to connect to different wallets. But there's really no mechanism, as there is often in web, where you'll connect up with WAGMI or RainbowKit, and you'll have this list. You'll have some modal that prompts here are the 11 different wallet addresses you can connect, and your app can be aware of the 10 different wallets that it has access to. And I know because a lot of people build in the browser-based context, this is like a really common use case, right? Like apps want to know what are all the different wallets that are available to me when the user is connected. And that's a reasonable use case, right? Like apps are built around this model. But in MWP right now, there are both some limitations in the way MWP works right now, like the MWP SDK, and just the way that like Webcast is set up. So right now, basically, you're connected to a single wallet at a time. So even if you request, right, you may send through WAGMI or send directly to the provider, like an ETH request wallets request. You're only going to get back a single wallet, or you'll get a list with one entry in it, which is whichever wallet is currently active and connected right now. So right now, the MWP SDK actually, even if the provider is providing multiple wallets at a time, it's only returning the first one. So there is a limitation here that's kind of built into the wallet SDK. We will probably go talk with the SDK team and see if we can change that for apps that want access to multiple wallets at a time. But right now, that's just a limitation that's like built into the way MWP works. So sort of think of it as access to one single wallet at a time. There is, though, also within Webcast right now, not a really great way to disconnect out of a wallet, right? Like the only way right now is to go change your preferred wallet from Rainbow to Coinbase, or like go disconnect those. You can also go into the app, right? Like if you go into Rainbow and find the connected apps section and like disconnect Webcast, would be in there somewhere, you can disconnect it. Then you'll be prompted next time to potentially select a different wallet. That interface is bad. We don't want users to have to continue doing that. So what we are likely to do, and this is going to be a priority next week when we get back to working on this, is put some Chrome in here that actually manages the connected wallet within the Webcast interface. So the user will be able to easily see, here's the wallet I have connected now. Here's a button I can tap if I want to switch the currently connected wallet. And we will manage that sort of outside the responsibility of the connected app. And then as a connected app, your expectation should be, I have one active wallet at a time. The user can change it, but whatever is connected currently is the wallet that's connected sort of for this whole session, right? Your app will be able to, like if you're using WAGMI or using standard tools, your app will get a notification right when those wallets change on the Webcast side. So you'll be able to react to that and be able to know. But there's not necessarily a mechanism for, here are the 12 different wallets that the user might have connected across all their different wallets available in the app, and here are the ones you can connect. Yeah. We hope to build a way to do this over time because we know like this is a common use case. But also this is like, we think this is a simpler model in a lot of ways too, and we think it will be positive for folks once we build the right tools for users. Ultimately, the end user needs to be able to switch the wallet that they're connected with. And we will probably provide a way for you to request also, if we can't do it through RPC, through like standard ETH request wallets, we'll figure out a way for you as the embedded app to request the wallets that a user has access to in some way. So sit tight here. We're going to probably ship a bunch of wallet improvements this week that will make this model a little bit easier. For now, though, like think about this model as there's one wallet connected at a time. And one benefit of this too is that like it can just be connected, right? You don't need to go build. You don't need to add RainbowKit to your app and like pop up a modal that shows all the different wallets that are available, or have the user connect which wallet they're connecting with, or any of this. Like you don't need that. The wallet will be connected. If the wallet is disconnected, Webcast will prompt the user to connect on your first interaction with something that interacts with the wallet. You don't need to build any of this like standard dApp wallet management, wallet connection stuff. It's just connected, like just out of the box. It's connected. You just grab the address and work with it from there. So ultimately, there are some rough edges for us to iron out and work out here, but we think this is going to be like a much simpler model for folks who are building dApps, and also for users who, the first thing they see in your app is not a huge pop-up that says, which chain are you connecting on? Which wallet do you want to connect on? Which wallet app? Which of these 34 addresses are you connecting to? So we're just going to have users manage that outside the app, connect a single address at a time, give them a simple interface within Webcast to go choose their connected wallet and connect that. But you as the app can just rely on, okay, a wallet is connected and I can get straight to interacting with it. Okay, those are the like common, frequently asked questions. Let's go through a few of these in the replies. Do frames v2 work on trigger by cast actions? So if the question here is, can you return a frame v2 from an existing cast action and have it pop up? Like right now, cast actions could return a frame with a frame URL, and we'll pop it up in the app and display it. The answer to that is right now, no, and probably not ever. Our goal with frames v2 is to unify all these things: cast actions, composer actions, mini apps, frames v1 into a single new standard. So cast actions will probably only ever be able to return a toast or a frame v1. We're not going to continue building on top of the existing stuff. We'll keep it around if folks are still building on it, but we're not likely to continue supporting new features on top of that. So we want folks to migrate to frames v2 if they're building new things. So what frames v2 will do is define different triggers. So if you go check out the frames v2 FIP, this is kind of far down at the bottom, but this is our vision for how we're going to unify things like cast actions and composer actions into frames. And so the idea here is that you will be able to invoke a frame v2 from these different triggers. So things like a cast. This will be the replacement for cast actions. Will be basically when you click the little cast actions button here and select a cast action that represents a v2 frame, we're going to invoke it with this cast trigger, which provides the context in the app, the same information that a cast action would have before, right? The cast hash, the content, the author ID, stuff like that. And so this is going to be the replacement for cast actions, right? It will be a frame v2 that's invoked in a cast context from the cast trigger. So really similar model to the way cast actions work today, but it's all going to be unified, right? So it's all going to use the same messaging format. It's all going to be sort of a single frame v2 app, one single thing that can be invoked and interacted with in a bunch of different ways. And so hopefully this is going to be a much simpler kind of unified model, especially for the end users, right? Users right now, they hear about all these different things: cast action, composer action, mini app, frame. That's all really confusing, right? In frames v2 for the users, it's just a frame. It's just an app. Like you're just interacting with it in different contexts throughout the app. So that's how that's going to work. This is coming in the medium term on the roadmap, right? Like maybe next week, maybe 2 weeks from now kind of thing, we'll have these other contexts. But this is where cast actions and composer actions are headed for sure. Can I get user custody address and verified addresses from frame context? So not in the current version of the SDK, but we plan on adding that. So in the next days or weeks, you will definitely be able to get that. This also is a big benefit, I think, to frames v2, is that we can put a lot more data in the user context, right? In frames v1, we were a little bit limited by using the protobuf format that hubs use, which was like the message format, since we were sort of reusing this notion of the signed frame message in order to verify the data. So we didn't add too much to those frame protobufs because it meant that, every time we had to add data to it, we were extending this frame message protobuf and they were getting bigger and bigger, and you had to send this to a hub and get it back. In frames v2, we have a lot more leeway to inject normalized data into the context, right? So you don't need to just get like sort of minimal data like a cast hash and then go to a hub or go to the Nanar API to go load that data. Actually, we can inject like the entire user profile, their normalized username, all their verified addresses, their location data, their verifications, like all this stuff that's on hubs, and not just in the kind of simple way that it's presented on a hub, but we can actually like present that in a nice way that you can use. So I think this is going to be really nice for a lot of developers. You won't need to like go get a cast hash and then go hit another API to get data about it. You'll just have all that data that you need about the user directly accessible within the frame. But sit tight, it's not in the user context yet, but definitely coming soon. And until then, just like do the frames v1 thing, go hit Nanar to go get details about a user by FID. If my app is originally powered by login with Farcaster via Privy, is there a way to make that play nice with WAGMI provider via the embedded frame? Might need to play around with it more, but my thought is just to log in with Farcaster via normal app and rely on WAGMI when connecting via the frame. Yeah, good question. There are a bunch of things for us to sort out here. One, I think, is we've heard from some devs who are having trouble connecting through the frame connector if they're using Privy to manage wallet connections within their existing app already. So I think we need to sit down with folks who are building on Privy, and probably the Privy team and figure out how to make our connector play nicely with that use case. So, sit on that. And if folks are building with Privy and have questions there or having trouble with that connector, we'd love to hear from you. So reach out to me. You can, though, I think, like potentially you could swap at the WAGMI provider level, right? Like use a different connector or a different provider, potentially if you're using Privy. I'm kind of just guessing here, but I think there's probably a way to swap at the like provider level from the Warpcast provider if you were loading in a Warpcast context to the Privy provider if you notice you're loaded like not in a Warpcast embedded frame context. And one thing that has come up in the last couple of days that we will work on there too is like this notion of how do I detect if my app is loaded in a frame context versus if my app is loaded outside of frame context. Right now, one thing you can do is just like look at whether the SDK has a user object defined. If there's no user objects in there, that means you're not loaded in a frame context. But long term, that's like you're relying on kind of something implicit there. We want to make that explicit. So we'll probably add a way for you as the app to just look in the context and see, am I actually loaded in the context of a frame, or am I maybe just running on the web? So we'll share that as we build that out in the next few days. Third thing here is like log in with Farcaster. So this is an open question for us, and something we're working on is figuring out the auth model for making it really easy to sign in with Farcaster from a frame v2. So that's definitely a little bit TBD. We will be working on that next week and figuring out exactly what requesting auth from a frame looks like. But we are hoping we can unify that too, right? So that maybe everything is just using sign in with Farcaster. So I think if we solve those three things, then this could actually be a really, really nice UX for using Farcaster, Privy auth, embedded wallet auth, and authenticating from a frame. So we will definitely get in touch with the Privy team and talk about this with them too. Okay, can you explain what frame connector is for? If my connected wallet is different than the Farcaster wallet, it's not prompting a change. Is it meant to? If not, what does frame connector actually do? Yeah, we talked about this a little bit previously with the like wallet model, right? We have this model where right now there's just a single wallet that's connected at a time. And the time that you will be prompted to potentially choose a different wallet is only when the user has completely disconnected their wallet and is like selecting a new wallet for the first time. In terms of what the connector is for, let's go look at the connector. Where's that? Lib connector. Connector is basically an abstraction over different types of providers, right? So the connector within WAGMI/VM is abstracting over different types of providers. This was all like kind of a mess on the web up until maybe a year and a half ago, where there were Ethers providers and Web3.js providers, and then eventually VM and WAGMI. Lots of different tools for like connecting to an Ethereum provider. There's this EIP 1191, 1193, whatever it is that defines the standard for Ethereum provider interfaces. But this connector basically abstracts over like the different wallet SDKs within WAGMI and VM, right? So converting different wallet-specific libraries and ways to interact with Ethereum to a single unified interface. So you can see we're implementing this custom connector interface here for our Farcaster wallet connector, which defines like setup, connect, disconnect, get accounts, basically this common interface for wallet operations. There are like several layers of abstraction out here, though, right? Like this provider is abstracting over an EIP 1193 provider. So you can see here we have some calls to provider request, which are calling these standard ETH RPC methods, ETH request accounts to connect. On switch chain, wallet, switch Ethereum chain, right? You can see we're interacting with this provider here, which is the injected EIP 1193 provider that's coming from the Frame SDK. And then we talked about the like communication model a little bit earlier. What's actually happening in this interaction with this provider is over that comlink interface, we're sending this provider RPC request from the embedded client window or the embedded frame app window back to the Warpcast client. Warpcast client is intercepting that, reading the method out of this RPC method, and then forwarding that to the user's connected wallet over mobile wallet protocol SDK. And then the final step there is that wallet may be Rainbow or maybe Coinbase wallet, right? And so they're like different. Fortunately, mobile wallet protocol is a single standard, but both of those apps those wallet apps are handling that message potentially in different ways. So those are like all the layers of abstraction that are happening here, right? Your frame app is using WAGMI, which is using this custom connector, which is abstracting over the injected EIP 1193 provider, which is sending a message back to Warpcast, which intercepts that, looks at the RPC method, and forwards that over mobile wallet protocol to another wallet. So the frame connector is that abstraction between the language WAGMI is speaking and the lower level provider interface. And yeah, the reason maybe you're not seeing prompting for change, you're not seeing the same model you see in building a web app where you have a bunch of different wallets connected is basically because of the way that the mobile wallet context works and the way MWP works. So your app has access to a single connected wallet at a time. We're going to make it easier for users to see which wallet that is, change that wallet, manage that in Warpcast. But probably that Chrome and that interface for wallet switching is going to be maintained within Warpcast or the Farcaster client that's embedding your app rather than within your app itself. KMac asks, where can we find info about building a V2 renderer? Any major changes? Yeah, good question. So the FIP is going to be your best place to look right now. Honestly, we don't have a lot in here on the rendering side for a couple reasons. One being it's pretty similar to Frames V1, like the same model of parsing the data, rendering the image, rendering the buttons. That stuff hasn't changed too much. Still the same model, right, with embeds in here of grabbing an embed, meta tag, loading that data, and then converting that to display the image and buttons that are defined in there. So like it's a pretty similar model from Frames V1. The things we probably should expand on a little bit here are the manifest and signature schema. There is a separate FIP for the signature schema, like the JSON signed data schema. But yeah, I'd say go look at the FIP for now. We also, have talked to other clients right now, and Warpcast is the only one that's implementing this right now. So we know that folks will be interested in implementing this eventually, and it will definitely be possible for folks to build renderers, but we're not quite there yet. We're the first movers here, and so we will write that up as we get further along with this and make sure folks are able to have a good standard for how other apps can implement this too. One more. Okay. Does dynamic import affect the standard behavior of Next.js? Should I create a separate page specifically for the frame? Do server components work well with climate components inherited through dynamic imports? Okay, it's like an interview question. Yeah, dynamic import in Next.js. Yes, it does affect the standard behavior of Next.js. And my understanding of this, though I am not a Next.js expert, is basically that this will create a separate, separately bundled JS snippet, like separate JS bundle for the components that you're importing dynamically. Where do we have one in here? Here we go. So you can even, I think, in here, I don't know the exact syntax here, but you can even define like a loading component within this dynamic function, which is used because it's importing this, basically importing this separately bundled JavaScript file where this component is defined. So yes, it does affect the default behavior of Next, right? Meaning it will dynamically load this, right? So some scaffolding within your page, right, is going to be maybe pre-generated, server-side rendered, and then within your page somewhere it's going to inject, an actual JavaScript tag that goes and loads this bundle of JavaScript and renders this component. So a lot of Next magic happening under the hood there, but at some point I would say the short answer here is that dynamic import, wherever your dynamic imports begin, the dynamic components in your app again, right? So that stuff will be rendered client side and like imported dynamically. And maybe furthermore than rendered client side, right? It will be imported client side, right? So it's actually like probably less performant than just rendering client side, because it's not just coming from the top level JS bundle, but it's actually imported dynamically. And I think actually like the most common use case of dynamic imports is for like heavy components in Next.js, where maybe you're loading like a charting library or some component that has is like heavyweight. Often you'll use dynamic imports for that. I would also say we are maybe overusing these. We have I know Vlad shipped some changes to the SDK that made it load more easily in a server-side context. So we can probably get rid of this over time as we figure out the model here and like polish the SDK a little bit. But also at the same time, like hopefully, these mini apps are pretty lightweight. So should be okay for now. Should I create a separate page specifically for the frame? So it depends on your app context. Not necessarily though, right? Like, I think it depends. Like you can use frames B2 very flexibly. You can put an embed in whatever page you want. You can put these embeds wherever, like we went over before. You can put an embed at any URL and it will turn it into a frame. So it's kind of up to the context of your app. I would say if you are building a frame first app, right, like a sort of a single page frame, then maybe just put your frame embed on the home page. Like that's how the demo app was set up. That's the simplest model. You sort of just have one route, which is the frame embed route and the app route all in one. If you have an existing site though, you may have other pages that you want to frameify. You have other contexts where you want to add frames, right? Like I think this is a big use case of frames too. Like maybe the WoW frame that we looked at is a good example of this, right? They already have hundreds of URLs for these different tokens, and they want every one of those URLs to be a frame. So in that case, they just drop those embeds into those different URLs. So it depends, but I'd say it's not necessary to create a separate page specifically for the frame. It's up to your application use case. Okay, finally, do server components work well with client components inherited through dynamic imports? Good question. My understanding, yeah, like you said earlier, my understanding is that basically where your dynamic imports begin, like dynamic behavior in your app begins. So yes, in the sense that the app will all work together. No, in the sense that the more dynamic stuff you're doing, the more dynamic imports you're using in the more places, the less performant your app is because it's less possible to pre-generate and pre-cache that content and make your app really snappy and fast because that's been pre-rendered server side. But yes, I think we are all working on this together and discovering the right model for this as well. And yeah, some people, I've had some feedback from people like, why are you guys using Next for your example? You have to disable a bunch of stuff like caching and these things within Next that make it complicated to set up an app. And I have some sympathy for that viewpoint, right? Like Next is not necessarily, we have chosen Next because like it's a simple way to get started. It works really well with Vercel. A lot of people in the ecosystem have already used it and get it. But there is a lot of magic built into Next, right? And I'm sympathetic to the anti-magic framework view, where people want to use a simpler framework that just has less magic built into it. I get that. That makes a lot of sense. In some places, maybe it's a simpler way to understand the model. The good thing about frames is you can use whatever framework you want, right? Like they are just web apps. So if you prefer a different stack, go ahead and use it. You're totally able to do that with frames. And yeah, I hope we see that in the future. Like things I think are cool potential avenues for frames. Like one thing we had with Frames V1 is we had two really great frameworks for building frames with Frames.js and Frog, sort of opinionated frameworks. Frames.js was great at dropping into existing Node applications. You could drop it on top of a Next app or whatever sort of standard Node HTTP app you had built, and it would really nicely integrate with those. Versus Frog, which is kind of a more strongly opinionated framework built on a specific stack. And I hope we see people people who are passionate about a particular JS stack build tooling for those stacks to build frames. And it probably is the case that Next is not the best the best potential app for building frames on top of. And I hope people can go out and discover what a really, really good opinionated frame stack looks like. So exercise for the reader there. Okay, cool. This has been like an hour, a lot longer than I thought. But yeah, hopefully this has answered some of the common questions about frames. Yeah, we talked over why your frames aren't loading in the DevTools, probably either because you're not calling the ready function or you have an interstitial in your tunneling tool. How do you add multiple embeds at different routes? Put meta tags in those routes wherever you want, defining different frames. There's no requirement that your frames are mapped one-to-one to the stuff defined in your app manifest. You can totally put different embeds in different places. Just drop meta tags into those places within your app. How do you set a fallback image for web? Make sure you have an open graph image tag defined in that route. And how do connected wallets work? Right now, you will have a single connected wallet in the context of the app. It will be already connected in most cases if you're using the default connector that we provided. And in the next week or so, we're going to build better tools in for managing, disconnecting, changing wallets, but that's probably going to be managed by the Warpcast interface rather than your interface as an app. So as an app builder, you can assume there is one connected wallet at a time, and we will give users the ability to tap and switch that and select that. Okay, thanks everyone.